The Sterling family had never seen real wealth. In the middle of their desperate engagement party, they landed racist insults like daggers on the black bride. They whispered, "Gold digger. She thinks she is climbing high. Soon she'll be discarded." Everyone expected her to bow her head, accept her place as the unwelcome outsider. But none knew that with a single call, the $120 billion merger the Sterling family desperately needed to survive bankruptcy could vanish in seconds. Hi, my beautiful family! If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video and comment where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's continue. Valentina Hayes stood before her bedroom mirror, her dark skin glowing against the emerald silk of her evening dress, fingers working methodically through her natural curls as she shaped them into an elegant updo. "You nervous, baby girl?" Eleanor Hayes appeared in the doorway, her silver hair pulled back in a timeless style that spoke of decades navigating boardrooms and diplomatic dinners. At 56, she still moved with the grace of the ambassador she once was. Valentina met her mother's eyes in the mirror. "Should I be?" "That depends." Eleanor crossed the room, her heels clicking against the hardwood. "Are you marrying Christopher Sterling the man, or Christopher Sterling the heir?" The question hung between them like smoke. Valentina had asked herself the same thing countless times over the past 8 months. She thought of Christopher's laugh when he discovered her terrible cooking, how he held her during thunderstorms, the way he looked at her like she hung the stars. Not like she was worth $2 billion. Not like her father owned half the tech companies in Silicon Valley. Like she was just Valentina. "The man," she said finally. "Definitely the man." Eleanor's smile was small but genuine. "Good. Because his family is about to meet the woman." Through the window, Valentina could see her father Franklin pacing the gardens below, phone pressed to his ear. Even at 60, he moved like a man who built empires with his bare hands. She knew he was finalizing details for Monday's merger announcement. $120 billion. The largest tech acquisition in corporate history. The Sterling family had no idea what was coming. "Mom." Valentina's voice was softer now. "What if they don't like me?" Eleanor's reflection appeared beside her daughter's in the mirror. "Baby, you graduated summa cum laude from Stanford. You've built 3 successful startups before your 28th birthday. You speak 4 languages and you've donated more to charity this year than most people make in a lifetime." She placed gentle hands on Valentina's shoulders. "If they don't like you, that's their loss. Not yours." But even as her mother spoke, Valentina felt the familiar knot in her stomach. The same one she'd carried since childhood, when other kids assumed she was the scholarship student. When professors looked surprised by her answers. When dates discovered her address and suddenly became very interested in her family's connections. She smoothed her dress one final time. The emerald fabric hugged her curves perfectly, the neckline elegant but not provocative. Conservative enough for old money sensibilities, beautiful enough to make Christopher forget his own name. Her phone buzzed. A text from him. "Can't wait to show you off tonight. You're going to love my family." Valentina stared at the message. Something in his certainty made her chest tight. She typed back, "Can't wait to meet them." But her hands shook as she sent it. 20 minutes across town, Christopher Sterling stood in his childhood bedroom, fighting with his bow tie and losing. The same bedroom where he'd dreamed of rockets and robots, where he'd coded his first program at 12, where he'd cried when his parents sent him to boarding school. Now at 30, he felt like that 12-year-old again. Scared and desperate for approval. "Christopher, darling, you're going to be late." His mother Patricia's voice floated up the stairs, carrying that particular tone that sounded like concern but felt like criticism. He'd been hearing it his entire life. "Coming, mother." He gave up on the bow tie and grabbed a regular tie instead. Navy blue. Safe. Professional. Everything his mother preferred. His reflection stared back from the mirror above his dresser. Sandy brown hair perfectly styled, blue eyes that everyone said looked just like his grandfather's, the same grandfather whose portrait hung in the downstairs hall. The grandfather who'd built Sterling Technologies from nothing into a $3 billion empire. The grandfather whose empire was about to collapse if this merger didn't go through. Christopher's stomach dropped the way it did every time he thought about the financial reports Benjamin Cross had shown him last week. The projections, the debt ratios, the increasingly desperate attempts to secure new funding. His father's pride had kept them from revealing just how bad things had gotten. But Valentina's family didn't need to know that. Not yet. Maybe not ever, if Franklin Hayes's reputation for turning around failing companies proved accurate. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Chris. His sister Caroline peeked around the door, already dressed in her signature black cocktail dress. At 26, she'd mastered their mother's art of looking perfectly put together while secretly judging everyone in the room. What's up, Care? She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Are you sure about this? About what? About her. Caroline perched on his desk chair, the same chair where they'd plotted elaborate schemes to avoid their parents' dinner parties. I mean, you barely know her family. And the timing is awfully convenient. Christopher's jaw tightened. Convenient how? Come on, Chris. Dad's been talking about this merger for months. Suddenly you're engaged to the daughter of the man who could save our company. She shrugged, but her eyes were sharp. I'm just saying it looks calculated. It's not calculated. I love her. I'm sure you do. But does she love you, or does she love what you represent? The question hit like a punch to the solar plexus. Christopher had wondered the same thing in his darkest moments. Valentina was brilliant, beautiful, successful in her own right. Why would she choose him? What did he offer that she couldn't get anywhere else? He thought of their first date, how she'd laughed at his terrible jokes and insisted on splitting the check. How she'd fallen asleep in his arms watching old movies, her head on his chest like she belonged there. How she looked at him when she thought he wasn't paying attention, like he was something precious. She loves me, he said firmly. And I love her. That's all that matters. Caroline studied his face for a long moment. Okay, but Chris, if this goes sideways, if she hurts you or if this whole thing is some kind of setup. She stood and smoothed her dress. I'll destroy her. The casual cruelty in her voice made Christopher's blood run cold. Caroline, what is wrong with you? Nothing's wrong with me. I'm protecting my family. She moved toward the door, then paused. Just remember, blood is thicker than water. Always. After she left, Christopher sank onto his bed. Through his window, he could see the sprawling grounds of the Sterling estate, the same grounds where he'd played as a child, where he'd brought his first girlfriend to meet his parents, where he'd dreamed of bringing his own children someday. But now, for the first time in his life, he wondered if this place felt more like a prison than a home. His phone buzzed. A text from Valentina. On our way. Promise me tonight will be perfect? Christopher's fingers hovered over the keyboard. He wanted to promise her everything would be wonderful, that his family would welcome her with open arms, that love would conquer whatever obstacles they faced. Instead, he typed, I promise I'll be right there with you, no matter what. As he headed downstairs to wait for the woman he loved, Christopher Sterling had no idea that by the end of the night, he would have to choose between his family and his future. And that choice would cost someone everything. The Sterling mansion blazed with warm light against the December darkness, its colonial facade framed by ancient oak trees that had witnessed 3 generations of family gatherings. Valentina stepped out of her father's black Tesla, her emerald dress catching the glow from the entrance lanterns. The cold air bit at her exposed shoulders, but she barely noticed. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she took in the sheer scale of the estate. Impressive, Franklin Hayes murmured, adjusting his charcoal overcoat. At 60, he still commanded attention wherever he went, his silver beard perfectly trimmed, his dark eyes missing nothing. Robert's done well for himself. Eleanor smoothed her burgundy wool coat. Let's hope his hospitality matches his real estate. Christopher appeared at the front door before they could ring the bell, his face lighting up like Christmas morning. He wore a navy suit that brought out his blue eyes, and when he smiled at Valentina, everything else faded away. This was why she'd said yes 8 months ago. This was why she'd fallen in love with a man whose world was so different from hers. You look incredible, he whispered, taking her hands. His were warm despite the cold, steady despite the nervous energy radiating from his body. "So do you?" She squeezed his fingers. "Ready for this?" Before he could answer, the front door opened wider. Patricia Sterling emerged, elegant in pearl gray silk, her blonde hair swept into a perfect chignon. Her smile was practiced, the kind Valentina had seen at charity galas and political fundraisers. "Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, welcome to our home." Patricia's voice carried the cultured tones of someone who'd never questioned her place in the world. "We're so delighted to finally meet Valentina's parents." Franklin stepped forward, extending his hand. "Mrs. Sterling, thank you for having us. Your home is beautiful. Please, call me Patricia. And this is my husband, Robert." Robert Sterling appeared behind his wife, tall and distinguished with silver threading through his brown hair. He shook Franklin's hand with the firm grip of a man accustomed to closing deals. But Valentina noticed the slight tension around his eyes, the way his gaze lingered on her father's expensive watch. "Franklin, I've been looking forward to this for months. Your reputation precedes you, as does yours." Franklin's smile was diplomatic but warm. "Though I understand congratulations are in order. Your son has excellent taste." All eyes turned to Valentina, and she felt the familiar spotlight sensation that had followed her since childhood. Being studied, evaluated, measured against expectations she couldn't see but somehow always fell short of. "Christopher certainly thinks so," Patricia said, her laugh tinkling like expensive crystal. "Though I must say, we were surprised when he told us about the engagement. It all happened so quickly. The first crack in the facade." Valentina's smile remained steady, but Christopher's hand tightened on hers. "When you know," Christopher said firmly. "Some things can't be rushed, but others shouldn't be delayed." "How romantic," Caroline Sterling's voice cut through the cold air as she joined them on the front steps. She wore black, as always, her dark hair falling in waves past her shoulders. Her smile was razor-sharp. "Though I suppose when the timing is right for business and pleasure." "Caroline." Christopher's voice carried a warning. "What?" "I'm just saying it's convenient that Dad's been talking about expansion opportunities and suddenly you're engaged to someone whose family could make that happen." She shrugged, the gesture perfectly calculated to look innocent. "Lucky coincidence." The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Eleanor's posture straightened, and Franklin's expression shifted to the politely neutral mask he wore in hostile boardrooms. "Caroline Sterling," Patricia hissed under her breath, but her daughter had already extended a manicured hand to Valentina. "I'm Caroline, the sister. Nice to finally meet the woman who swept my brother off his feet." Valentina took the offered hand, keeping her grip firm and her voice steady. "Nice to meet you too, Caroline. Christopher's told me so much about you. All good things, I hope. He loves you very much. Family means everything to him." Something flickered in Caroline's dark eyes. "Yes, it does. Family loyalty is so important, don't you think? Especially when there's so much at stake." "Caroline, that's enough." Robert's voice carried authority, but Caroline merely smiled wider. "I'm just making conversation, Dad. Getting to know our future family member." She turned back to Valentina. "So tell me, what do your parents do? Christopher's been surprisingly vague about your family business." The question landed like a slap. Not what does your father do, but what do your parents do, as if the idea of Valentina having her own career was inconceivable. As if she was defined entirely by her family connections. Franklin answered before Valentina could speak. "I'm in technology and real estate development. My wife Eleanor was a diplomat before she joined me in business." "How interesting." Patricia's smile grew brighter, but there was something predatory in it now. "And Valentina? What keeps you busy?" "I run 3 tech startups focused on sustainable energy solutions." Valentina kept her voice level, professional. "We specialize in solar integration for urban environments." "Startups," Caroline repeated, as if the word tasted sour. "How ambitious. Though I suppose everyone thinks they're going to be the next Mark Zuckerberg these days." Christopher stepped closer to Valentina, his arm sliding around her waist. Valentina's companies have revolutionized green energy implementation in 5 major cities. She's been featured in Forbes twice. Christopher, darling, you don't need to oversell her accomplishments, Patricia said with a laugh that cut like glass. I'm sure Valentina's work is very meaningful to her. The dismissal was subtle but unmistakable. Valentina felt heat rise in her cheeks, not from embarrassment but from anger. She'd heard this tone before, from investors who assumed she was window dressing, from competitors who underestimated her, from people who looked at her and saw only what they expected to see. Perhaps we should go inside, Eleanor suggested, her diplomatic training evident in how smoothly she redirected the conversation. It's getting quite cold. Of course, how rude of us to keep you standing out here. Patricia gestured toward the door. Please, come in. We have champagne waiting. The sterling foyer was everything Valentina had expected. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors staring down from gilded frames. Old money trying very hard to look eternal, though she noticed the subtle signs of careful maintenance, the way certain pieces had been strategically placed to hide wear on the wallpaper. Your home is lovely, Eleanor said, running her fingers along a mahogany side table. This piece is exquisite. Thank you. It belonged to Christopher's great-grandmother. So much history in these walls. Patricia's voice carried the weight of generations, as if history itself validated her position. We're very fortunate to be caretakers of such a legacy. Legacy is important, Franklin agreed. Though sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't what we receive, but what we build ourselves. Robert's laugh was hearty but slightly forced. Well said. Though I admit, standing on the shoulders of giants certainly helps with the view. They moved into the living room, where a fire crackled in a fireplace large enough to roast a pig. The furniture was antique but comfortable, arranged in conversation clusters that spoke of years of entertaining. A server appeared with champagne flutes on a silver tray, each glass filled with golden bubbles that caught the firelight. To new family, Robert raised his glass, and everyone followed suit. To new family, they echoed, but Valentina caught the way Caroline's eyes lingered on her, calculating and cold. So Valentina, Patricia settled into her chair with the grace of a queen claiming her throne. Tell us about your family's background. Are you from Boston originally? No, we're from California. Silicon Valley area. Oh, how modern. Patricia's smile was indulgent. I imagine it's quite different from our traditions here on the East Coast. We do things rather traditionally in our family. Tradition can be wonderful, Valentina agreed carefully, as long as it doesn't prevent growth and progress. Growth, yes. Caroline leaned forward, her champagne glass dangling from her fingertips. Speaking of which, I'm curious about the timing of all this. The engagement, it's interesting how quickly things moved after Dad mentioned looking for expansion opportunities. Christopher set his glass down hard enough to make everyone look. Caroline, what exactly are you trying to say? Nothing, brother dear. Just that some people might think it's quite a coincidence. Your whirlwind romance happening right when the company needs fresh perspectives. The room fell silent except for the crackling fire. Valentina felt every eye on her, measuring her reaction, waiting to see if she'd crack under the pressure. She'd faced down hostile takeover attempts and cutthroat investors, but somehow this felt more personal, more cruel. Are you suggesting, Valentina's voice was silk over steel, that I'm some kind of opportunist who engineered a relationship for business purposes? Oh goodness no, Caroline's laugh was bright as broken glass. I would never suggest something so mercenary. I'm just curious about the timing. Surely you can understand our protective instincts when it comes to family. Caroline. Robert's voice carried warning now. That's quite enough. Is it though, Dad? We barely know anything about her. What she really wants, what her family expects from this union. Caroline's mask was slipping, revealing something uglier underneath. I think we have a right to ask questions. Franklin set his champagne down with deliberate care. What exactly would you like to know? Well, for starters, What are your expectations regarding the marriage? Financially speaking. The question hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Eleanor's knuckles were white around her champagne flute. Christopher looked like he might be sick. Caroline Sterling, Patricia's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. You apologize this instant. But Caroline was past caring about appearances now. Why should I apologize for looking out for my family's interests? For asking questions that need to be asked? She turned to Valentina, her dark eyes glittering with malice. You have to admit, it's all very convenient. The timing, the circumstances, the fact that your father's company could solve all our problems. What problems? Valentina asked quietly. The question landed like a bomb in the elegant living room. Robert's face went pale, Patricia's champagne glass trembled in her hands, and Christopher looked like he wanted to disappear into the antique Persian rug. Caroline, Robert's voice was deadly quiet. Not another word. But the damage was done. In trying to attack Valentina, Caroline had revealed the Sterling family's carefully hidden desperation. The financial crisis they'd been hiding, the merger they needed more than they'd ever admit. Valentina looked around the room, seeing it all with new eyes. The careful maintenance, the strategic placement of furniture, the way Robert had lingered on her father's watch. They weren't just wealthy family protecting their son from a gold digger. They were a family drowning in debt, terrified that their salvation was about to slip away. I think, Eleanor said into the crushing silence, we should perhaps discuss this privately. Among the adults. Patricia's face flushed red. Mrs. Hayes, I assure you, my daughter doesn't speak for this family. Doesn't she? Franklin's voice was calm, but Valentina recognized the tone. It was the same one he used right before he walked away from a deal. Because it sounds to me like she's saying exactly what the rest of you are thinking. Christopher found his voice. Mr. Hayes, I swear to you, I had no idea Caroline was going to. Going to what? Franklin stood, his imposing frame making the room feel smaller. Going to question my daughter's motives? Going to suggest she's a gold digger? Going to make it clear that your family sees her as a business opportunity rather than a human being? That's not. Christopher started, but the words died in his throat. Because it was exactly what they'd done. And everyone in the room knew it. The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Valentina stood frozen in the middle of the Sterling family living room, surrounded by faces that ranged from mortified to defiant. The fire crackled cheerfully in the background, oblivious to the emotional wreckage scattered across the Persian rug. I think, she said finally, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands, I need some air. She walked toward the French doors leading to the terrace, her heels clicking against the marble with military precision. No one moved to stop her. No one spoke. She pushed through the doors and stepped into the December night, the cold air hitting her like a physical blow. Behind her, voices exploded. Caroline, what have you done? Patricia's voice cracked with panic. I did what needed to be done, Caroline shot back. Someone had to ask the hard questions. By insulting our guests? By suggesting their daughter is some kind of... Robert's voice trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Some kind of what, Dad? Some kind of woman who might actually expect something from this family? Some kind of person who might not be grateful just to marry into our social circle. Valentina pressed her palms against the stone balustrade, forcing herself to breathe. The terrace overlooked manicured gardens that probably cost more to maintain than most people made in a year. In the distance, she could see the lights of downtown Boston twinkling like fallen stars. She thought about her own family's estate in Palo Alto, with its solar panels and vertical gardens, its art collection spanning 3 continents, its library filled with first editions and family photographs. She thought about the companies she'd built from nothing, the patents she held, the employees who depended on her vision. She thought about the merger documents sitting in her father's briefcase. $120 billion. The Sterling family's salvation, and they didn't even know it. The French doors opened behind her, and she didn't need to turn around to know it was Christopher. She could feel his presence, his anguish radiating across the space between them. Val, I'm so sorry. She didn't turn around. Are you? Of course I am. I had no idea they would. Would what? Would treat me exactly the way they've been treating me since we arrived. She finally faced him, and the pain in his blue eyes almost made her step forward. Almost. The surprised looks when you mentioned my Forbes features. Your mother's little comments about my meaningful work. Caroline's questions about my motives. Christopher ran his hands through his perfectly styled hair, leaving it disheveled. They're just protective. My family has been through a lot, and sometimes they what? Sometimes they assume that any woman who wants to marry you must have ulterior motives. Valentina's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. Sometimes they decide I'm not good enough before they even know me. That's not what this is about. Then what is it about, Christopher? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like your family took one look at me and decided I was a threat. Not because of who I am, but because of what I look like. The words hung between them like a verdict. Christopher opened his mouth to deny it, then closed it again. Because they both knew she was right. Inside the house, the argument continued. Through the glass doors, they could see Franklin standing with his arms crossed, his expression carved from granite. Eleanor sat perched on the edge of a chair, her diplomat's mask firmly in place but her eyes blazing with controlled fury. Patricia wrung her hands while Robert tried to restore some semblance of order to the chaos his daughter had created. My family isn't racist, Christopher said quietly, but the words sounded hollow even to him. Valentina laughed, but there was no humor in it. Aren't they? Then explain to me why Caroline assumed I was after your money before she even knew my last name. Explain why your mother keeps talking about traditions and different backgrounds like they're coded warnings. Explain why your father keeps looking at my parents like he's trying to figure out if we're worth the trouble. Christopher sank into one of the wrought iron chairs scattered across the terrace, his head in his hands. I don't know. I hoped they would see what I see in you. And what do you see in me? He looked up, his eyes searching her face. Everything. Your brilliant mind, your kind heart, your strength, your beauty. The way you laugh at my terrible jokes. The way you fall asleep reading business journals. The way you make me want to be better than I am. Despite everything, Valentina felt her heart soften. This was the man she'd fallen in love with. Not the heir to a fortune, not the solution to her family's business plans, but the man who brought her coffee in bed and remembered she liked extra cinnamon. But love wasn't always enough. Do you know what I see when I look at your family? She asked. I see people who have already decided who I am without bothering to learn. I see people who assume the worst about my motives while hiding their own desperate circumstances. Christopher's head snapped up. What do you mean? Valentina studied his face, looking for any sign that he knew about his family's financial crisis. The genuine confusion in his eyes told her everything she needed to know. You really don't know, do you? Know what? Before she could answer, the French doors burst open. Caroline stormed onto the terrace, her black dress billowing behind her like a war flag. Her face was flushed with anger and something that looked like panic. This is rich, Caroline spat. The grieving victim act. Very convincing. Caroline, go back inside. Christopher's voice carried more authority than Valentina had ever heard from him. No, I don't think I will. Someone needs to say what everyone's thinking. Caroline turned to Valentina, her dark eyes glittering with malice. You want to know what we see when we look at you? We see an opportunist. We see someone who swooped in at exactly the right moment to take advantage of a family in crisis. Caroline, stop. Christopher stood, his hands clenched into fists. Stop what? Telling the truth. We're broke, Christopher. Completely, utterly broke. Dad's been hiding it for months, but the company is drowning in debt. And suddenly, miraculously, you fall head over heels for the daughter of the one man who could save us. Caroline's laugh was bitter. What are the odds? The revelation hit Christopher like a physical blow. Valentina watched his face go pale, watched the pieces click into place. The late-night phone calls his father took in private. The way his mother had started selling jewelry she claimed was outdated. The sudden interest in expansion and merger opportunities. That's not. Christopher started, but his voice broke. That's not what? Not true. Not convenient. Not exactly what it looks like. Caroline whirled on him. Her fury turned sibling fierce. Wake up, Chris. This whole romance is a business transaction, and you're just the merchandise. Valentina felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest. Not because Caroline was right, but because Caroline believed so completely that she was right. Because this family couldn't conceive of any other reason why she might want Christopher. You're wrong, Valentina said quietly. Am I? Then prove it. Walk away. Call off the engagement. If you really love my brother for who he is and not what our family can offer your father's business empire, then prove it. The challenge hung in the air between them. Christopher looked from his sister to his fiancée, his face a mask of confusion and pain. Inside the house, the argument continued, voices raised in anger and desperation. You want me to prove I love him by leaving him? Valentina asked. I want you to prove you're not using him. Valentina looked at Christopher, really looked at him. The man she'd fallen in love with was still there, but now she could see the scared little boy underneath. The heir who'd never learned his own worth beyond his family name. The son who'd spent his whole life trying to earn approval from people who measured love in stock options and social status. The merger, she said finally. You didn't know about the merger, did you, Christopher? He shook his head mutely. What merger? Caroline's voice was sharp with suspicion. Valentina almost laughed. They were so busy assuming she was using them that they'd never bothered to learn who she really was. Never bothered to research her family's holdings or her father's business interests. They'd been so focused on protecting themselves from her that they'd missed the irony entirely. They needed her far more than she needed them. Ask your father, she said to Caroline. Ask him about the $120 billion merger he's been negotiating with my family for 6 months. Ask him why Franklin Hayes flew across the country for a dinner party. Ask him what happens to Sterling Technologies if that deal falls through. Caroline's face went white. You're lying. Am I? Valentina pulled out her phone, scrolled to a text message from her father's assistant, and showed it to both siblings. The message was brief but clear. Merger documents finalized. Announcement scheduled for Monday 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Press release attached. Christopher read the message over Caroline's shoulder, his face going from pale to gray. Val, I swear I didn't know. I know you didn't. And that was the most heartbreaking part. Christopher was as much a pawn in this game as she was, manipulated by his family's desperation and his own need for approval. This changes nothing, Caroline said, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. If anything, it proves my point. You're using him to get close to our family business. Your family business that's worth less than I spent on my last car? Valentina's voice was silk over steel. Your family business that needs my family's money to survive the next fiscal quarter? The truth hit Caroline like a slap. Her mouth opened and closed without sound. I don't need your money, Valentina continued. I don't need your social connections. I don't need your approval or your acceptance or your fake politeness that barely covers your contempt. She looked at Christopher, and her voice softened. I only need him. But apparently that's not enough. She turned to go back inside, then paused. For what it's worth, Caroline, you're right about one thing. This whole situation is a business transaction. But you've got the players wrong. I'm not trying to marry into your family for gain. Your family is trying to marry me off to save themselves from bankruptcy. She left them standing on the terrace, two siblings staring at each other in the wreckage of their assumptions. Through the French doors, she could see her parents in heated discussion with Robert and Patricia. For people trying to salvage something from the disaster the evening had become. But as Valentina walked back into the warm light of the Sterling mansion, she wasn't thinking about business mergers or family politics. She was thinking about the look in Christopher's eyes when he realized how badly he'd been manipulated. She was thinking about whether love could survive this much betrayal, even when the betrayal wasn't intentional. She was thinking about the apron that waited in her future, and the choice that would destroy everything. Valentina stepped back into the living room to find her parents locked in what appeared to be a civilized but deadly serious conversation with Robert and Patricia Sterling. The adults had arranged themselves like opposing armies across the antique furniture, with Franklin and Eleanor on one side, the Sterling parents on the other, and an ocean of unspoken accusations between them. "Ah, Valentina!" Franklin looked up as she entered, his expression unreadable. "We were just discussing the evening's complications." Patricia Sterling twisted her pearl necklace between her fingers, her earlier poise completely shattered. "Please, dear, sit down. I think we need to address what happened." Before Valentina could respond, Christopher and Caroline burst through the French doors, both windswept and shaken. Caroline's perfect composure had cracked completely, leaving her looking younger and more vulnerable than Valentina had ever seen her. Christopher's face was gray with shock, his eyes darting between his parents and his fiancée. "Is it true?" he asked his father without preamble. "Are we really broke?" Robert Sterling aged 10 years in the span of a heartbeat. His shoulders sagged, and when he looked at his son, there was nothing left of the commanding businessman who had greeted them at the door an hour ago. "Christopher, sit down. Please, answer the question." Christopher's voice cracked like a whip. "Are we bankrupt?" "Not bankrupt," Robert said carefully. "But we're leveraged beyond our comfort zone. The tech market downturn hit us harder than we anticipated. We've been exploring options." "Options like marrying me off to save the company?" Christopher's laugh was bitter. "How long have you known about the merger, Dad? How long have you been planning this?" Patricia stood abruptly, her hands pressed to her chest. "Christopher, you can't think we would manipulate your feelings. Your relationship with Valentina developed completely independently of any business considerations." "Did it?" Caroline's voice was small, broken. "Because the timing is awfully convenient, isn't it? Chris meets the perfect girl right when we need her father's money most." Eleanor Hayes cleared her throat delicately. "If I may interrupt this family discussion, I think there are some misconceptions that need to be cleared up." All eyes turned to her. Even in the midst of chaos, Eleanor commanded attention with the quiet authority of someone who had negotiated treaties and managed international crises. First, the merger between Hayes Industries and Sterling Technologies has been in development for 8 months, not 6. The initial contact came from your company, Mr. Sterling, not ours. Her voice was calm, factual. Second, my husband and I were unaware of any romantic relationship between our daughter and your son until Christopher asked for her hand in marriage 6 weeks ago. The silence that followed was deafening. 6 weeks ago, Franklin repeated slowly. 2 months after we'd already agreed to the preliminary terms of the acquisition. Robert Sterling's face went from gray to green. "Franklin, I can explain." "Can you?" Franklin's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "Because it sounds to me like your son courted my daughter while you were negotiating to acquire her family's assets. It sounds like this entire relationship might have been orchestrated from your end." "No." Christopher's voice was barely a whisper. "No, that's not. I love her. I love Valentina. This has nothing to do with business." "Doesn't it?" Caroline looked like she might be sick. "Dad, when did you first mention the Hayes merger to Christopher? When did you first suggest he might want to expand his social circle, meet new people?" Robert Sterling couldn't meet his son's eyes. "Christopher, you have to understand, the company was in trouble. I hoped." "You hoped what?" Christopher's voice rose to a shout. "You hoped I'd fall in love with her so you could save your failing business? You manipulated my feelings to secure a deal." "That's not how it happened," Patricia said desperately. "We never asked you to pursue Valentina romantically. We never even suggested. You didn't have to." Christopher ran his hands through his hair, leaving it standing in desperate spikes. All those casual mentions of Franklin Hayes and his brilliant daughter. All those invitations to charity galas where you knew she'd be. All those comments about how I should think about settling down, finding a woman with substance. The pieces were falling into place with devastating clarity. Valentina watched Christopher's face as he realized the scope of his family's manipulation, and her heart broke for him even as her own anger grew. "But why?" she asked quietly. "If you needed the merger so badly, why treat me like a gold digger tonight? Why risk alienating me?" Robert Sterling looked like he wanted to disappear into the Persian rug. We assumed you knew about the business arrangement. We thought you were playing the same game we were." "What game?" "The merger and acquisition game," Patricia said miserably. "Wealthy families combining assets through marriage. It's how these things are done in our circles. We thought you understood that the romance was secondary to the business considerations." Valentina stared at them in disbelief. "You thought I was pretending to love your son to facilitate a business deal? Weren't you?" Caroline asked, but there was no hostility left in her voice. Only desperate confusion. "I mean, the timing, the circumstances. It all seemed so calculated." "The only thing calculated here," Franklin said coldly, "was your family's manipulation of my daughter's emotions and your son's heart. You turned love into a business strategy." Christopher sank into a chair, his head in his hands. "How could I have been so blind? How could I not see it?" "Because you're not cynical enough to assume the people who claim to love you are using you," Valentina said gently. She wanted to go to him, to comfort him, but the space between them felt like a minefield now. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Eleanor said, her diplomatic mask slipping to reveal the angry mother underneath. "This is why we kept our business affairs separate from Valentina's personal life. We never wanted her to question whether people cared about her or her trust fund." "Your trust fund?" Patricia's voice was barely a whisper. "Valentina's personal net worth is approximately $2 billion, Franklin said matter-of-factly. "Her trust fund, her business holdings, and her intellectual property portfolio. She doesn't need to marry anyone for money, Mrs. Sterling. She needs to marry someone who loves her despite it." The room fell silent except for the ticking of the antique mantel clock and the distant sound of traffic from the street. Caroline stared at Valentina with something approaching awe. Patricia gripped her pearl necklace so tightly that Valentina worried she might break it. Robert looked like he might faint. $2 billion, Caroline repeated faintly. "Personal net worth." "Give or take," Valentina said with a shrug. "I don't keep exact track. My accountants handle the details." "But you're so young," Patricia protested, as if youth made wealth impossible. "How could you possibly?" 3 successful startups, 2 of which I sold for substantial profits. 12 patents in sustainable energy technology. A venture capital fund that has backed 17 companies, 14 of which have gone public or been acquired. Valentina's voice was calm, professional. Plus the trust fund my grandfather established, which has been growing for 28 years. Christopher looked up at her, his blue eyes wide with something between admiration and despair. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted you to love me, not my portfolio." She met his gaze steadily. "Because every time I tell someone how much money I have, they start treating me differently. They start calculating what they can get from me instead of seeing who I am." "Like we did," Caroline said quietly. "We saw you as a threat to our financial security instead of seeing you as Christopher's choice." "Like you did," Valentina agreed. "But at least you were honest about it. Your parents saw me as a business opportunity disguised as romance." Robert Sterling finally found his voice. "Valentina, I want you to know that Christopher's feelings are genuine. Whatever mistakes we made, whatever appearances we created, his love for you is real." "Is it?" Valentina looked at Christopher, who was staring at his hands. "How can any of us be sure now? How can we separate what's real from what was orchestrated?" "Because I remember how I felt before I knew about your money," Christopher said quietly. "I remember falling in love with you when I thought you were just another entrepreneur struggling to build something from nothing. I remember thinking you were out of my league because you were so brilliant and driven and beautiful, not because of your bank account. But now you know about the bank account. Now you know about the merger and your family's desperation and all the reasons why this relationship serves everyone's interests except our own." Valentina's voice broke slightly. "How do we move forward from here?" Before anyone could answer, Patricia's phone rang. The sound was jarring in the heavy silence, and everyone turned to look at her. She fumbled for the device, her hands shaking. "I'm sorry, I should." She glanced at the caller ID and her face went white. "It's Benjamin Cross, our attorney." Robert grabbed the phone from his wife's hands. "Benjamin? What is it?" Even from across the room, they could all hear the urgent voice on the other end of the line. Robert's face went from white to gray to green as he listened. Finally, he hung up and looked around the room with the expression of a man facing his own execution. "What is it?" Patricia whispered. "The Financial Times is running a story tomorrow morning about Sterling Technologies' financial situation. Someone leaked our quarterly reports." His voice was hollow. "Benjamin says we have maybe 12 hours before the markets open and our stock price crashes. If we don't have the merger announcement ready." He didn't need to finish the sentence. They all understood. Without the Hayes merger, Sterling Technologies would collapse publicly and spectacularly. The family would lose everything. Christopher looked up at Valentina, his eyes full of a desperation that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with love. "Val, I know this looks bad. I know it seems like everything was orchestrated. But I swear to you, my feelings are real." "I believe you," she said, and meant it. "But believing you and trusting this situation are two different things." Franklin checked his watch. "The merger announcement is scheduled for 9 a.m. Monday. That's 36 hours from now. We could move it up, make it tomorrow morning instead." "You could save us," Robert said quietly. "Your family could save everything we've built." "Yes," Franklin agreed. "We could. The question is, should we?" All eyes turned to Valentina. In the span of 2 hours, she had gone from hopeful bride-to-be to the sole decision-maker in a $120 billion deal. The Sterling family's entire future rested in her hands. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she could hear Caroline's earlier challenge echoing. "If you really love my brother for who he is and not what our family can offer your father's business empire, then prove it." The irony was perfect and terrible. She could prove her love was real by destroying the man she loved. She could save the man she loved by validating every horrible assumption his family had made about her. Either choice would cost her everything that mattered. Outside, snow began to fall, dusting the windows with white crystals that caught the lamplight like tears. The snow fell heavier now, coating the Sterling mansion's windows with a veil of white that made the warm interior feel like a sanctuary cut off from the world. But there was no comfort in the isolation. The living room had become a tribunal, with 7 people trapped by circumstance and the weight of secrets that could no longer be hidden. Eleanor Hayes broke the crushing silence first. "I think it's time for complete honesty. All of us." She looked around the room with the steady gaze of someone who had spent decades navigating international crises. "Because right now, everyone is operating on assumptions and half-truths, and that's not fair to anyone." Patricia Sterling clutched her champagne glass like a lifeline. "What do you want to know?" "Let's start with the beginning," Franklin said, settling back in his chair with the patience of a man accustomed to extracting truth from reluctant witnesses. "When did Sterling Technologies first approach Hayes Industries about a potential merger?" Robert Sterling's face flushed red. 10 months ago. Last February." Christopher's head snapped up. 10 months? But you didn't introduce me to Valentina until 8 months ago, his father finished miserably. "At the Stanford Alumni Charity Gala in April." The admission hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Valentina felt her stomach drop as the timeline crystallized. The charity gala where she'd first met Christopher, where he'd charmed her with his terrible jokes about venture capitalism and his genuine interest in her sustainable energy projects. "You researched her," Christopher said, his voice hollow with realization. "Before the gala, you researched her and then made sure I'd be there." "I researched her father's business holdings," Robert corrected weakly. "I thought it might be beneficial for you to expand your professional network." By dating his daughter? By meeting accomplished people in your field. Valentina's work in sustainable technology aligned perfectly with Sterling's expansion goals. It seemed logical. Caroline laughed, but there was no humor in it. Logical. You pimped out your son for a business deal and called it logical. Caroline, Patricia gasped. How can you say such a thing? Because it's true, Mother. We all know it's true. Caroline turned to Valentina, her dark eyes bright with unshed tears. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what we did to you. For what we did to both of you. Valentina studied Caroline's face, seeing past the earlier hostility to the frightened young woman underneath. You knew, didn't you? About the financial problems. Caroline nodded miserably. I've been helping Dad with the books since I graduated. I knew how bad things were getting. I knew we needed a miracle. She looked at Christopher with something between love and pity. I thought you knew too. I thought you were going along with the plan. What plan? Christopher's voice cracked. The plan to save the company by marrying into the Hayes family. Caroline's composure finally cracked completely. I thought you were sacrificing your happiness for the family business. I thought you were being noble and self-sacrificing, and I was trying to protect you from getting hurt. The revelation hit Christopher like a physical blow. He doubled over as if someone had punched him in the stomach. You thought I was pretending to love her? I thought you were doing what needed to be done. What the family needed you to do. Tears streamed down Caroline's face now. I've been watching you fall in love with her for months, watching you light up every time you talked about her, and I thought it was all an act. I thought you were destroying yourself to save us. So you decided to destroy her instead, Eleanor said quietly, but her voice carried the weight of absolute judgment. Caroline flinched as if she'd been slapped. I thought she was playing the same game we were. I thought she was pretending to care about Christopher to secure the merger for her family. Even though we didn't need the merger, Franklin pointed out. Even though Hayes Industries is perfectly stable without Sterling Technologies. We didn't know that, Robert protested. Your reputation suggested ambitious expansion, the kind that requires strategic partnerships. Franklin's smile was cold. My reputation for ambitious expansion comes from acquiring failing companies and turning them profitable. Sterling Technologies fits that profile perfectly. The words settled over the room like a blanket of ice. Robert Sterling had just admitted that his company was exactly the kind of failing enterprise that Franklin Hayes specialized in rescuing. Tell them the rest, Eleanor said to her husband. Tell them about the real timeline. Franklin nodded. Hayes Industries first became aware of Sterling Technologies' financial difficulties in January, when your creditors started making inquiries about potential buyers. We weren't interested initially. The tech sector was too volatile, and your debt-to-asset ratio was problematic. Then what changed your mind? Patricia asked faintly. Nothing changed my mind. I never intended to pursue the acquisition. Franklin looked directly at Christopher. Until you asked for my daughter's hand in marriage. The room went dead silent. Christopher stared at his future father-in-law with dawning horror. You didn't want to buy our company, Christopher said slowly. You only agreed to the merger because I proposed to Valentina. Exactly. Franklin's voice was matter-of-fact. Valentina came to me 6 weeks ago, glowing with happiness, telling me about the wonderful man she'd fallen in love with. She asked for my blessing to marry Christopher Sterling. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. That's when I learned that my daughter's fiancé was the heir to a failing company that had been courting my business for months. Oh God, Patricia whispered. You must have thought. I thought exactly what any father would think. That someone was using my daughter's feelings to manipulate a business deal. Franklin's eyes hardened. So I had Sterling Technologies investigated thoroughly. What I found was a family desperate enough to do anything to avoid bankruptcy, including, apparently, orchestrating their son's love life. Robert Sterling aged another 10 years in the span of a heartbeat. Franklin, I swear to you, we never told Christopher to pursue Valentina romantically. We never asked him to fake feelings or manipulate her emotions. No, you just made sure they met. You just guided him toward her. You just created the circumstances where romance was likely to develop." Franklin stood, his imposing frame making the room feel smaller. "And then you sat back and waited to see if love could save your failing empire." Christopher looked up at Valentina, his blue eyes full of pain and something that looked like understanding. "This is why you've been pulling back lately, isn't it? This is why you've seemed distant the past few weeks." Valentina nodded. "My father told me about the merger 3 weeks ago. He wanted me to know what I was walking into." "And what did he tell you?" "He told me that your family's company was hemorrhaging money, that they'd approached us for acquisition months before we met, that the timing of our relationship and their business needs was remarkably convenient." She met his gaze steadily. "He told me I needed to decide if I believed your feelings were real or if you were the best actor in the world." "And what did you decide?" "I decided that I loved you enough to find out the truth. I decided that if you were acting, you deserved an Oscar. And I decided that if your family was using you to manipulate me, then they were hurting you as much as they were hurting me." Christopher's face crumpled. "They were, weren't they? Using me. All those casual suggestions about expanding my social circle, all those invitations to events where you'd be present, all those conversations about settling down with someone substantial." He looked at his parents with something approaching hatred. "You turned me into bait." "Christopher, that's not how we saw it," Patricia said desperately. We hoped you might find someone who shared your values, someone who understood business, someone who could be a true partner. Someone whose family could save your asses when the quarterly reports came out," Caroline added bitterly. "Let's be honest about what this was." "But it worked, didn't it?" Robert's voice carried a note of desperate hope. "You did fall in love. Both of you. Real feelings developed despite the circumstances." "Did they?" Valentina asked quietly. "How can we know? How can we separate what was real from what was manufactured?" Christopher stood abruptly and walked to the windows, staring out at the falling snow. "I remember the first time I saw you at the gala. You were standing by the silent auction table, studying a painting of the Golden Gate Bridge. You had this little frown of concentration, like you were trying to figure out why the artist had chosen that particular angle." His voice was soft, reflective. "I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, but it wasn't just your looks. It was the way you carried yourself. Confident but not arrogant. Present but not performing. Like you belonged in that room not because of your dress or your jewelry, but because of who you were inside." He turned back to face the room. "I remember working up the courage to talk to you for 20 minutes. I remember my hands shaking when I introduced myself. I remember the way you laughed at my terrible joke about venture capitalism and how that laugh made me feel like I could conquer the world." Tears were streaming down Valentina's face now. "I remember that joke. It was awful. It was terrible," he agreed with a watery smile. "But you laughed anyway. And then you told me about your solar panel project, and your eyes lit up like you were describing magic instead of technology. I fell in love with that passion before I fell in love with anything else." "Christopher," Robert said softly, "son, your feelings are real. Whatever mistakes we made, whatever appearances we created, what you feel for Valentina is genuine." "Is it?" Christopher looked around the room, his gaze settling on each face in turn. "Because right now I can't tell where my feelings end and your manipulation begins. I can't tell if I love her or if I was programmed to love her." "You weren't programmed," Eleanor said firmly. "Love can't be manufactured, Christopher. Circumstances can be arranged, opportunities can be created, but feelings? Real feelings develop on their own schedule and for their own reasons." Then explain to me why I felt like I'd been struck by lightning the first time she smiled at me. Explain to me why I spent 3 hours on the phone with my college roommate after our first date, trying to describe how she made me feel. Explain to me why I bought an engagement ring after knowing her for 6 months, when I'd never thought about marriage before in my life. "Because you fell in love," Valentina said simply. "Just like I did." Even knowing what you knew about the merger? Even knowing how convenient our timing was? Especially knowing that. She stood and crossed to him, stopping just close enough to touch if she reached out. Because if you were acting, if this was all a performance designed to manipulate me, then you're the most talented actor who ever lived. And if it was real, if you really fell in love with me despite all the business complications and family pressure and financial desperation. She reached out and touched his face gently. Then you're the bravest man I've ever met. Christopher leaned into her touch, his eyes closing with something that looked like relief. I love you, Val. I love you so much it scares me. I love you enough to walk away from all of this if that's what it takes to prove my feelings are real. And I love you enough to stay, she whispered. Despite everything. Despite the manipulation and the assumptions and the business deals. I love you enough to fight for us. Behind them, the adults watched in silence as the two young people found their way back to each other across a minefield of family betrayal and financial desperation. But even as they held each other, the clock on the mantel ticked steadily toward midnight, and outside the snow continued to fall. Somewhere in the city, journalists were preparing to publish a story that would destroy the Sterling family by morning. And in a few hours, Valentina would face the choice that would define the rest of their lives. Sometimes love survives even when trust is shattered. The revelation of truth had cleared the air in the Sterling mansion like a thunderstorm washing away oppressive humidity. For the first time all evening, Valentina could breathe without feeling like she was walking through a minefield of hidden agendas and unspoken accusations. Christopher still held her hands, his thumbs tracing gentle circles across her knuckles. The simple touch grounded her in a way that nothing else could. Whatever manipulation had brought them together, whatever business considerations swirled around their relationship, this moment felt real, pure, untainted by family politics or financial desperation. So where do we go from here? Eleanor asked gently, breaking the contemplative silence that had settled over the room like a soft blanket. Franklin checked his watch, his expression thoughtful. The Financial Times story runs in 7 hours. If we're going to announce the merger early, we need to make the decision tonight. Robert Sterling's face was haggard with exhaustion and shame. Franklin, I want you to know that regardless of what happens with the business arrangement, I will spend the rest of my life making up for what we put your family through tonight. And I want you to know, Patricia added, her voice thick with unshed tears, that watching Christopher with your daughter these past months, seeing how happy she makes him, how he lights up when he talks about her. She looked at Valentina with something approaching wonder. I was a fool to question your motives. Anyone with eyes can see how much you two love each other. Caroline, who had been sitting in stunned silence since her emotional breakdown, finally spoke. Valentina, can you forgive me? For what I said, for how I treated you, for assuming the worst about your intentions. Valentina studied Christopher's sister, seeing past the earlier hostility to the frightened young woman who had been trying to protect her family the only way she knew how. You were protecting someone you love. I understand that impulse, even if I didn't appreciate the execution. That's more grace than I deserve. Maybe. But it's what I'm choosing to give. Valentina squeezed Christopher's hands before gently pulling away and walking to Caroline. Your brother loves you very much. He's talked about you constantly since we started dating. Your opinion matters to him more than you know. Caroline's eyes filled with fresh tears. I've been such a fool. Such a cruel, jealous fool. You've been scared, Valentina corrected, settling onto the arm of Caroline's chair. Your family was facing financial ruin, your brother was involved with someone you didn't understand, and you were trying to control a situation that felt completely out of control. But I hurt you. I said terrible things. Yes, you did. And yes, it hurt. Valentina's voice was gentle but honest. But hurt feelings heal, Caroline. Broken families don't always recover so easily. Caroline looked up at her with something between gratitude and amazement. How are you being so kind to us? After everything we've done. Because holding on to anger would poison the love I have for your brother. And because everyone in this room made mistakes tonight, but everyone also loves Christopher in their own way. Valentina glanced around the room, her gaze settling on each face. Love makes people do stupid things sometimes. It makes us desperate and protective and willing to hurt others if we think it will protect the people we care about. Christopher moved to stand behind her, his hands settling gently on her shoulders. You're talking about more than just tonight, aren't you? Valentina leaned back against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. I'm talking about the 3 weeks I spent questioning your motives after my father told me about the merger. I'm talking about the private investigator I hired to look into your past relationships. The admission fell into the room like a stone into still water. Christopher's hands tightened on her shoulders, but he didn't pull away. You hired a private investigator? I had to know, she said quietly. I had to know if you had a history of dating wealthy women, if there was a pattern of behavior that suggested you were using me. She turned in her chair to face him. I'm talking about the background check I ran on your family's financial situation 3 weeks ago. Robert Sterling's face went pale. You knew about our problems. I knew everything. The debt, the failed product launches, the investor meetings that went nowhere, the creditors circling like vultures. Valentina's voice was steady, professional. I knew that your family needed my family's money far more than we needed your technology or market share. Then why? Patricia's voice trailed off in confusion. Why didn't you call off the engagement? Why didn't you protect yourself? Because the private investigator also told me that Christopher has never dated anyone for longer than 3 months. He's never introduced a girlfriend to his family. He's never talked about marriage or settling down with anyone. Valentina reached for Christopher's hand, pulling him around to face her. And because when I watched you with other people, when I saw how you treated waiters and doormen and taxi drivers, when I watched you interact with children at charity events, I realized that you're genuinely kind. Not performed kindness, not strategic niceness. Real kindness that comes from who you are inside. Christopher sank into the chair beside her, his expression a mixture of relief and amazement. You investigated me and decided to trust me anyway. I investigated you and discovered that you're exactly who I thought you were. A good man caught in an impossible situation. She smiled at him, the first genuine smile she'd managed all evening. A man worth fighting for. Eleanor cleared her throat delicately. Perhaps this would be a good time to address the immediate practical concerns. Christopher, what do you want to happen with the merger? Christopher looked around the room, his gaze settling on his father's haggard face, his mother's tear-stained cheeks, his sister's hopeful expression. I want my family's company to survive. I want the people who depend on Sterling Technologies to keep their jobs. But I don't want Valentina to feel pressured into saving us out of obligation. And I don't want you to feel guilty about accepting help, Valentina replied. Your family's company has good bones, Christopher. The technology is solid, the market position is salvageable, and the employee base is talented. It's exactly the kind of acquisition that makes sense for Hayes Industries. Franklin nodded approvingly. The merger benefits both companies. Sterling gets the capital injection they need to stabilize and grow. Hayes gets access to Sterling's research and development capabilities in emerging markets. Plus, Eleanor added with a slight smile, it gives us an excuse to see our future son-in-law at family board meetings. The comment broke the tension in the room like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Robert Sterling actually laughed, a sound of genuine relief and gratitude. You're really going through with it? He asked. The merger. We're really going through with it, Franklin confirmed. Though I suggest we restructure the announcement timeline. Instead of waiting until Monday, we'll hold a press conference tomorrow morning at 10. That should beat the Financial Times story and control the narrative. Patricia pressed her hands to her heart. I don't know how to thank you, how to begin to express our gratitude. Start by welcoming my daughter into your family the way she deserves to be welcomed, Eleanor said firmly. Start by treating her with the respect and affection you'd want someone to show Caroline if she brought home the man she loved. Consider it done, Robert said solemnly. Valentina, I promise you from this moment forward, you will be treated as a cherished daughter, not a business associate. Caroline stood abruptly and crossed to where Valentina sat. I have something that belongs to you. She pulled a small velvet box from her purse, her hands trembling slightly. "Christopher asked me to hold on to this earlier, before the party started. He said he wanted to give it to you tonight, after he introduced you to the family." She handed the box to Christopher, who opened it to reveal a stunning emerald ring surrounded by diamonds. The stone caught the firelight and threw green sparks across the room. "It belonged to my grandmother," Christopher said softly. "She always said it should go to the woman who made her grandson believe in forever." He looked up at Valentina, his blue eyes bright with unshed tears. "I was going to propose again tonight, officially, in front of both our families." "You were. I wanted your parents to see how much you mean to me. I wanted my family to understand that you're not just someone I'm dating, you're the woman I want to spend my life with." He slipped out of his chair and onto one knee, the velvet box cradled in his palms. "I know we're already engaged, but after everything that's happened tonight, I want to do this right." The room fell silent except for the soft crackling of the fire and the gentle whisper of snow against the windows. Valentina felt her heart swell with an emotion so powerful it threatened to lift her right out of her chair. "Valentina Hayes," Christopher's voice was steady despite the tears in his eyes. "Will you marry me? Not because our families need the merger, not because it makes business sense, not because the timing is convenient, but because I love you more than I ever thought it was possible to love another person. Because you make me want to be better than I am. Because you're the first person who ever looked at me and saw someone worth choosing, not just someone worth using." Through her own tears, Valentina could see their families watching with expressions of hope and joy and relief. She could see the love shining in Christopher's eyes, untainted now by doubt or manipulation. She could see the future stretching out before them, bright with possibility. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Christopher Sterling. I will marry you. Not because of mergers or money or family expectations, but because you're the kindest, funniest, most genuine man I've ever known. Because you make me laugh when I want to cry. Because you believe in me even when I don't believe in myself." He slipped the emerald ring onto her finger, and the fit was perfect. As if it had been waiting for her all along. The room erupted in applause and tears and laughter. Patricia sobbed openly while Robert pulled out his phone to call Benjamin Cross with the good news. Caroline hugged her brother and then surprised everyone by hugging Valentina just as fiercely. Eleanor and Franklin smiled at each other with the satisfaction of parents who had raised a daughter strong enough to weather any storm. For a moment, surrounded by love and acceptance and the promise of a future built on genuine affection rather than business necessity, Valentina allowed herself to believe that the hardest part was behind them. She had no idea that her greatest test was still ahead. Outside the windows, the snow continued to fall, and somewhere in the darkness, a photographer with a telephoto lens captured images that would change everything by morning. But for now, in this moment of perfect happiness, Valentina Hayes Sterling-to-be was exactly where she belonged. In the arms of the man she loved, surrounded by the family she was choosing to join, secure in the knowledge that real love had triumphed over manipulation and fear. The engagement ring caught the light as she raised her hand to touch Christopher's face, and she thought she had never seen anything more beautiful. She was wrong about that too. The most beautiful thing was still to come, but it would be born from the ashes of the ugliest moment of her life. Valentina woke to the sound of her phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand of her hotel suite at the Four Seasons. She and her parents had returned to their hotel just after midnight, leaving the Sterling family to prepare for the morning press conference that would announce the merger and save their company. She stretched languidly, Christopher's grandmother's emerald ring catching the early morning light streaming through the windows. The night had ended in triumph, with love conquering manipulation and families uniting despite their earlier mistakes. For the first time in weeks, she had slept peacefully. The phone buzzed again. Then again. Frowning, Valentina reached for the device, expecting to see messages from Christopher or perhaps her assistant confirming the press conference details. Instead, she found 17 missed calls from Victoria Lang, her best friend and the one person who knew her well enough to call this early only in an emergency. Her blood ran cold. She hit Victoria's number, and her friend answered on the first ring. "Val, thank God. Are you okay? Are you somewhere safe?" "I'm fine. I'm at the Four Seasons." "Victoria, what's wrong? You sound terrified. Have you seen the news?" Have you looked at social media? No, I just woke up. What news? But even as she asked, Valentina was reaching for her laptop, dread settling in her stomach like a stone. Page 6, Entertainment Tonight, TMZ, they're all running the same story. There are photos, Val. Lots of photos. Valentina's laptop screen came to life, and she navigated to page 6 with trembling fingers. The headline hit her like a physical blow. Tech heiress caught in gold digger scandal. Secret recording reveals billion-dollar bride's true motives. Below the headline was a series of photographs that made her stomach lurch. Pictures of her and Christopher on the Sterling Mansion's terrace the night before, their faces clearly visible through the French doors. Pictures of the engagement party, with Caroline's hostile expressions captured in perfect detail. Pictures of Franklin and Robert in what appeared to be heated negotiation. But it was the final image that destroyed her completely. A photograph of Patricia Sterling handing her something small and white, both women smiling. The caption read, "Sterling family matriarch Patricia Sterling presents Hayes with an apron, symbolically welcoming her to learn her proper role in the family." "Oh God," Valentina whispered. "Victoria, this isn't what it looks like." "I know that, but the whole world doesn't. Keep reading." With shaking hands, Valentina scrolled down to read the article. Sources close to the Sterling family reveal that last night's engagement party was actually a carefully orchestrated business meeting disguised as a social gathering. Tech heiress Valentina Hayes, whose family's estimated net worth exceeds $15 billion, was allegedly caught on recording discussing the financial benefits of her upcoming marriage to struggling tech heir Christopher Sterling. "The marriage isn't about love," the unnamed source claims Hayes said during a private conversation. "It's about positioning. Christopher's family needs our money, and we need their social connections. It's the perfect merger disguised as romance." The source, who attended the party and provided exclusive photographs, describes a scene where Hayes appeared to openly mock the Sterling family's financial desperation while her father negotiated acquisition terms in a separate room. Most damaging of all is an alleged recording of Hayes laughing about her fiancé's naivety. "He actually thinks this is a love story," she reportedly said. "Poor Christopher has no idea this was arranged from the beginning. My father picked him out like he was shopping for a new car." The Sterling family, facing rumors of financial difficulties, could not be reached for comment. The Hayes family's representatives have not responded to requests for verification. Valentina's hands were shaking so violently she could barely hold the laptop. "Victoria, I never said any of those things. I never had any of those conversations. I know, honey. I know you. But whoever leaked this story has done a masterful job of twisting the truth. They've taken real events and conversations and completely manipulated the context." The hotel room door burst open, and Eleanor Hayes rushed in, still wearing her robe and slippers. Her face was a mask of controlled fury. "Valentina, are you all right? I've been fielding calls from reporters for the past hour." "Mom, I didn't say those things. I would never." "Of course you didn't." Eleanor sat on the bed and pulled her daughter into her arms. "But someone wants the world to think you did. Someone who was at that party last night has sold a completely fabricated story to the tabloids." Franklin appeared in the doorway, his phone pressed to his ear. "I understand, Benjamin. Cancel the press conference. Issue a statement that the Hayes family will not be commenting on unsubstantiated rumors." He hung up and looked at his daughter with eyes full of pain. "The merger announcement has been postponed indefinitely." "Daddy, what does that mean for the Sterling family?" "It means their stock price is going to crater when the markets open in 2 hours. It means the Financial Times story about their financial difficulties will run without the positive merger news to offset it." Franklin's voice was heavy with regret. "It means they're going to lose everything." Valentina's phone rang. Christopher's name appeared on the screen, and she answered immediately. "Chris, are you okay?" "Val, I need you to know that I don't believe a word of what they're saying about you." His voice was strained, exhausted. "Not a single word." "Where are you?" "At home. We've been dealing with reporters since 5 a.m. They're camped outside the gates like vultures." His voice broke slightly. Val, my mother is devastated. She keeps saying she never gave you an apron, that she never made you feel unwelcome. She's convinced someone staged that photograph. She didn't give me an apron, Valentina said firmly. Chris, none of this happened the way they're describing. I know that. But the damage is done. The story is everywhere. Social media is exploding with commentary about gold diggers and arranged marriages and desperate families selling their sons. His laugh was bitter. The worst part is that some of it is true. My family was desperate. The timing was convenient. If someone wanted to construct a narrative about manipulation and greed, they had plenty of real material to work with. Through the phone, Valentina could hear shouting in the background, multiple voices talking over each other in what sounded like panic. Christopher, what's happening there? Caroline is having a complete breakdown. She's convinced this is her fault, that her behavior last night somehow caused this. Dad is on the phone with lawyers, trying to figure out who could have leaked such detailed information about our financial situation. And Mom. His voice trailed off. What about your mom? Mom is convinced that someone in your family orchestrated this. She thinks your father planned the whole thing as a way to acquire our company for pennies on the dollar. Christopher's voice was hollow. She thinks you've been playing a longer game than any of us realized. The accusation hit Valentina like a punch to the solar plexus. She thinks I did this? She thinks I destroyed my own reputation and humiliated both our families as part of some business strategy. She's scared, Val. When people are scared, they look for someone to blame. And she's blaming me. She's blaming your family. She thinks the Hayes Empire is using this scandal to force Sterling Technologies into a fire sale. She thinks you'll swoop in tomorrow with a lowball offer and acquire everything for a fraction of its worth. Valentina closed her eyes, the full scope of the disaster becoming clear. Chris, you know I would never do that. You know my family would never do that. I know. But right now, with reporters shouting questions about gold diggers and business arrangements, with our stock price in free fall and our reputation in ruins, it's hard to think clearly. The sound of breaking glass came through the phone, followed by Caroline's voice raised in anguish. I have to go, Christopher said. Caroline just threw something at the wall. I think it was her phone. Wait, Chris. I need to see you. I need us to figure this out together. I don't think that's a good idea right now. The press is watching everything. Any meeting between us will just fuel more speculation. So what are we supposed to do? Let lies destroy everything we've built. The silence stretched between them, filled with all the things they couldn't say over a phone line that might be tapped, all the reassurances they couldn't give while the world was watching. I love you, Val. That hasn't changed. That will never change. I love you too. More than ever. But love might not be enough to survive this. The line went dead, leaving Valentina staring at her phone in numb shock. Around her, her parents were making phone calls, issuing statements, trying to contain the damage. But she could see the truth in their faces. This wasn't a scandal that could be managed or spun or wished away. This was character assassination on a scale that would follow her for the rest of her life. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check your email. The real story is just beginning. With trembling fingers, she opened her email to find a message with no sender name and an audio file attachment. The subject line read, "You want to know who destroyed your fairy tale? Listen." She clicked on the audio file, and Caroline Sterling's voice filled the hotel room. I can't let this happen. I can't let him marry her. She's going to destroy everything we've worked for. Another voice, male, unfamiliar. What do you need from me? I need her gone. I need her humiliated so completely that Christopher will have no choice but to walk away. I need a story that will make her radioactive to every eligible man in America. That's going to cost you. Name your price. I'll pay anything to protect my family. The recording ended, and Valentina sat in stunned silence as the truth crashed over her like a wave. Caroline Sterling, the sister who had apologized so tearfully just hours before, had orchestrated the entire scandal. The sister who had hugged her and welcomed her into the family had simultaneously hired someone to destroy her reputation. Eleanor looked at her daughter's face and knew immediately that something had shifted. "What is it, baby?" Without a word, Valentina turned the laptop around so her parents could see the email. She played the recording again, watching as their faces moved from confusion to understanding to absolute fury. Franklin's voice was deadly quiet when he spoke. Caroline Sterling did this. She hired someone to create a fake story and leak it to the press. Not just hired someone, Eleanor said, her diplomat's mind already working through the implications. She gave them access to the party. Someone was inside last night, taking photographs, recording conversations, gathering material for the story. Someone Caroline brought with her or paid to infiltrate the gathering. Valentina's phone rang again. This time it was Caroline's number. She answered, putting the call on speaker so her parents could hear. "Valentina." Caroline's voice was thick with tears, shaking with what sounded like genuine distress. "Have you seen the news? Someone leaked our private family business to the press. Someone photographed our party and twisted everything that happened." "I know," Valentina said quietly. "I just heard the recording of you paying them to do it." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "Caroline, are you still there?" "I." Caroline's voice was barely a whisper. "How did you get that recording?" "Someone sent it to me. Someone who apparently wants the truth to come out." Valentina's voice hardened. "Someone who wants me to know that while I was forgiving you last night, while I was choosing to trust your family despite everything that happened, you were busy hiring someone to destroy my life." "Valentina, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" "Explain how you hugged me and welcomed me to the family while simultaneously planning my public humiliation? Explain how you apologized for hurting me while paying someone to hurt me in ways I never imagined possible." "I was scared," Caroline sobbed. "I was terrified that you were going to destroy my family, and I panicked. I called someone I knew in the media, someone who owed me a favor, and I asked them to find dirt on your family. I never meant for it to go this far." "You never meant for what to go this far? You never meant for the lies you told to be believed? You never meant for your brother's heart to be broken along with mine?" "I thought." Caroline's voice dissolved into incoherent crying. "I thought if there was a scandal, if there were questions about your motives, Christopher would postpone the wedding. I thought it would buy us time to figure out another solution to our financial problems. I never wanted to hurt you this badly." "Well, congratulations," Valentina said, her voice cold as winter steel. "You succeeded beyond your wildest dreams. You've destroyed my reputation, humiliated both our families, cost your brother the woman he loves, and guaranteed that your family's company will collapse completely. I hope whatever momentary sense of control you felt was worth it." She hung up the phone and sat in the wreckage of her life, surrounded by the people who loved her most, facing a choice that would define everything that came next. She could fight the lies, hire the best lawyers and publicists money could buy, and spend years trying to rebuild her reputation while watching the man she loved suffer for his sister's betrayal. Or she could walk away completely, disappearing from Christopher's life before the scandal could destroy him too. Either choice would cost her everything that mattered. But only one choice would protect the man she loved from the consequences of loving her. Outside her hotel window, the morning sun climbed higher in a cloudless December sky, and somewhere across the city, Christopher Sterling was facing the same impossible choice. Neither of them knew that the worst was yet to come. The Four Seasons hotel suite had become a war room. Franklin's phone rang constantly with calls from board members, investors, and reporters seeking comment on the scandal. Eleanor coordinated with their legal team while monitoring social media reaction to the story that was spreading like wildfire across every platform. Valentina sat curled in the window seat, Christopher's grandmother's emerald ring still on her finger, watching the December afternoon fade into gray twilight. 7 hours had passed since the scandal broke, and the damage was beyond catastrophic. Sterling Technologies stock had lost 60% of its value before trading was suspended. The Hayes family's reputation, built over 3 generations, was under assault from every direction. But the worst part was the silence from Christopher. No calls, no texts, No communication at all since their devastating phone conversation that morning. The legal team thinks we can prove the quotes were fabricated, Eleanor said, settling beside her daughter with a steaming cup of tea. The recording of Caroline is admissible evidence. We can fight this, baby. Fighting it will take years, Valentina replied without taking her eyes off the window. Years of lawsuits and depositions and media coverage. Years of having every relationship I've ever had dissected in public. Years of watching Christopher suffer because he chose to love me. Franklin ended his latest call and joined them by the window. The Sterling family's attorney called. Benjamin Cross wants to arrange a meeting. He says there are things we need to discuss that can't be handled over the phone. What kind of things? He wouldn't say. But he sounded. Franklin paused, choosing his words carefully. He sounded desperate. Before Valentina could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Rooftop garden. Come alone. Please. See. Her heart leaped into her throat. He wants to meet me. Eleanor read the message over her daughter's shoulder. Absolutely not. It's too risky. Any meeting between you two will be photographed and twisted into more evidence for the gold digger narrative. Mom, I have to see him. I have to know what he's thinking, what he's feeling, what he wants to do. What if this is a trap? Franklin's voice was heavy with parental worry. What if his family convinced him that you're the enemy? What if he's planning to publicly reject you to save his own reputation? The possibility hit Valentina like a physical blow, but she pushed through the pain. Then I need to know that too. I can't make any decisions about our future without understanding where he stands. Eleanor gripped her daughter's hand. And if he chooses his family over you? Then I'll know I was right to consider walking away. Valentina stood, smoothing her emerald dress, the same one she'd worn to the disaster of an engagement party that seemed like a lifetime ago. But if there's even a chance he still wants to fight for us, I need to give him that opportunity. She made her way to the hotel's rooftop garden, her heart pounding with each step. The December air was sharp and clean, with the last traces of the previous night's snow clinging to the planters and benches. The Boston skyline stretched out before her, lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. Christopher stood silhouetted against the city lights, his shoulders rigid with tension. He wore the same navy suit from the night before, now wrinkled and showing the strain of a sleepless night. When he turned to face her, Valentina's heart broke at the exhaustion in his blue eyes. You came, he said quietly. You asked me to. They stood facing each other across the rooftop, two people who had been desperately in love 12 hours ago and now felt like strangers navigating a minefield. How bad is it? Valentina asked. At your house, with your family. Christopher ran his hands through his hair, leaving it disheveled. Caroline hasn't stopped crying since she confessed everything to us this morning. She keeps saying she never meant for it to go so far, that she just wanted to buy time to find another solution. And your parents? Dad is trying to hold the company together with duct tape and prayer. The board called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. They're talking about replacing him as CEO. Christopher's voice was hollow. Mom locked herself in her bedroom after the third reporter called asking for comment on the arranged marriage scandal. They still think my family orchestrated this whole thing. No, they know the truth now. Caroline played the recording for them, the one where she hired that journalist to fabricate the story. Christopher's laugh was bitter. Turns out my sister has been planning this for weeks. Ever since she realized how serious we were about each other. Valentina felt tears prick at her eyes. Chris, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry my love for you brought this chaos into your life. Don't. His voice was sharp, cutting. Don't you dare apologize for loving me. Don't you dare take responsibility for my sister's actions. But if I hadn't been there last night, if I hadn't engaged with Caroline's hostility, if I had just walked away when she started attacking me, then she would have found another way to destroy us, another angle to attack from. Christopher stepped closer, his eyes blazing with an emotion she couldn't identify. Val, do you want to know what I've been doing all day? While my family's world was collapsing around us. She nodded, not trusting her voice. I've been researching you. Really researching you, not just the business databases my father used. I looked up every article ever written about you, every interview you've given, every charity you've supported. His voice grew stronger with each word. I found out about the scholarship fund you established for underprivileged kids to attend coding camps. I found out about the Clean Water Initiative you funded in 3 African countries. I found out about the anonymous donation you made to rebuild the library in your hometown after it was destroyed by fire. Valentina stared at him in surprise. How did you find out about the anonymous donation? Because I called the library director and explained that I was planning to marry Valentina Hayes and wanted to understand the kind of person I was committing my life to. Christopher's smile was sad but genuine. She told me that you've been quietly funding community projects for years, always insisting on anonymity, never seeking credit or recognition. Why does that matter now? Because it tells me who you really are. Not the woman Caroline paid someone to portray in the tabloids. Not the gold digger the media is painting you as. The real Valentina, who gives away millions of dollars and doesn't want anyone to know about it. Fresh tears spilled down Valentina's cheeks. Chris, knowing who I really am doesn't change our situation. It doesn't undo the damage Caroline has done to both our families. No, it doesn't. But it changes everything about what I want to do next. He pulled his phone from his pocket and showed her the screen. I've written a press statement. My publicist is ready to release it the moment I give the word. Valentina read the statement, her eyes widening with each sentence. My name is Christopher Sterling, and I want to set the record straight about the woman I love. The stories circulating about Valentina Hayes are fabricated lies created by someone in my own family who was too afraid to trust in love. Every quote attributed to Valentina is false. Every cruel sentiment is fiction. Every accusation is a betrayal not just of her, but of the truth. Valentina Hayes is the most generous, brilliant, and genuine person I have ever known. She has never asked my family for anything. She has never treated me as anything other than a man she chose to love, not a fortune she chose to marry. I know this statement will cost me everything. I know it will destroy what's left of my family's reputation and probably end my relationship with some of the people I love most. But I would rather lose everything than let lies stand unchallenged when they're directed at the woman who means more to me than life itself. Valentina, if you're reading this, I'm sorry it took me 12 hours to find the courage to defend you the way you deserve. I'm sorry my family's fear made them cruel to you. I'm sorry my sister's jealousy turned her into someone capable of such calculated betrayal. But I'm not sorry I love you. I will never be sorry I love you. And if you'll still have me, I want to spend the rest of my life proving that our love is stronger than their lies. Valentina looked up from the phone to find Christopher watching her with an expression of absolute determination. You're going to publish this? I'm going to publish this. I'm going to call every reporter who's been hounding my family today and tell them exactly what happened. I'm going to make it clear that if they want to attack you, they'll have to go through me first. Chris, this will destroy your relationship with your family. Caroline will never forgive you for publicly exposing her actions. Caroline destroyed our relationship the moment she hired someone to fabricate lies about the woman I love. My parents destroyed their credibility the moment they let fear turn them against you. His voice was steady, certain. I'm done protecting people who refuse to protect the most important person in my life. But your company, your family's legacy, will survive or it won't. But I refuse to sacrifice you to save it. Christopher took her hands in his, the emerald ring catching the city lights. Val, I need you to know something. Even if publishing this statement destroys me, even if it costs me everything I've ever had, I'm going to do it. Because letting lies define the woman I love is not an option. And what if it doesn't work? What if people don't believe your statement? What if the damage is too deep to repair? Then we'll build something new. Somewhere else, with new people, under new circumstances. But we'll build it together. Valentina felt something shift inside her chest, something that had been frozen with fear and doubt beginning to thaw. You're really willing to give up everything for me? I'm willing to give up everything false and destructive and based on fear." Christopher pulled her closer, until she could feel his heartbeat against her chest. "But I'm not giving you up. I'm not letting Caroline's jealousy or my parents' desperation or a pack of lying journalists take away the best thing that's ever happened to me. What if I wanted to walk away? What if I thought it was better for both of us if I just disappeared from your life?" Christopher's grip on her hands tightened. "Then I'd follow you. I'd spend however long it took convincing you that we're stronger together than apart. I'd prove that love isn't something to be sacrificed for convenience or reputation or family peace. Even if it takes years to clear our names? Even if we spend our entire engagement fighting gossip and lawsuits and public scrutiny? Especially then. Because the people who matter will know the truth, and the people who don't know the truth don't matter." Valentina looked into his eyes and saw the future she'd been afraid to hope for. Not perfect, not easy, but real. Built on truth instead of manipulation, on choice instead of convenience, on love strong enough to weather any storm. "There's something else," Christopher said, pulling out his phone again. "Caroline gave me the contact information for the journalist she hired. His name is Marcus Webb, and he's agreed to write a follow-up story exposing the truth about how the original article was created." "Why would he do that?" "Because Caroline recorded their conversations. She has evidence of paying him to fabricate quotes and manipulate photographs. If he doesn't cooperate in setting the record straight, she'll release those recordings and destroy his career." "So Caroline is finally doing something to help fix this mess?" "She's trying. She knows she can never undo what she's done, but she's determined to expose every lie she helped create." Christopher's expression was grim. "It won't repair all the damage immediately, but it will start the process of clearing your name." Valentina felt the weight of the impossible choice lifting from her shoulders. Not because the situation was easy, but because she finally understood what Christopher was offering her. Not a perfect life free from scandal or difficulty, but a partnership strong enough to face whatever came next. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "Once you publish that statement, once you go to war with your own family to defend me, there's no going back." "I've been sure since the moment I realized you were brave enough to love me despite knowing about the merger and the financial desperation and all the reasons our relationship looked calculated." Christopher smiled, and for the first time all day, it reached his eyes. "I've been sure since I understood that you investigated me and chose to trust me anyway." "Then do it," Valentina said, her voice steady and certain. "Publish the statement. Call the reporters. Tell the world that we're not going anywhere." Christopher lifted their joined hands and kissed her knuckles, right above his grandmother's emerald ring. "Are you ready for this fight?" "I've been ready since I fell in love with you." Valentina smiled back at him, feeling stronger than she had since the whole nightmare began. "Let's show them what real love looks like." As the city lights sparkled below them and the December stars appeared overhead, Christopher Sterling pressed send on the statement that would change everything. Not by erasing the damage that had been done, but by choosing love over fear, truth over convenience, and partnership over the approval of people who had proven themselves unworthy of trust. The fight wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But for the first time since waking up to the scandal that morning, Valentina Hayes felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Standing beside the man who would choose her over everything else in the world, ready to build something beautiful from the ashes of other people's fear. The hardest test was behind them now. But the best part of their story was still ahead. When someone loves you enough to risk everything to defend your honor, that's when you know it's real. 24 hours after Christopher's statement went public, the world looked completely different. Valentina stood in the Hayes Industries boardroom, wearing a navy blue power suit that made her look every inch the tech mogul she was born to be. Through the conference room windows, she could see reporters gathered outside the building, but their questions had changed overnight from accusations to requests for interviews about her charitable work and business innovations. Franklin entered the room carrying a stack of newspapers and a satisfied smile. "The morning editions are remarkable," he said, spreading them across the mahogany conference table. "Look at these headlines. The Boston Globe, Tech Heir's passionate defense of fiancé exposes family betrayal. The Wall Street Journal, Sterling Technologies Scandal. When Jealousy Trumps Truth. USA Today. Love Conquers Lies. The real story behind the Hayes-Sterling romance. The Washington Post has the most comprehensive coverage, Eleanor said, joining them with her tablet in hand. Marcus Webb's expose is devastating. He provided recordings of all his conversations with Caroline, documented evidence of the payment she made to fabricate quotes, and a minute-by-minute timeline of how they staged the photographs. Valentina picked up the Post article, reading the journalist's own words. I have spent 15 years as an entertainment reporter, and I have never been asked to fabricate a story so completely from thin air. Caroline Sterling approached me with a specific request. Destroy Valentina Hayes' reputation so thoroughly that her brother would be forced to choose between his fiancée and his family's survival. The quotes attributed to Ms. Hayes in yesterday's Page 6 article are entirely fictional. The photographs were taken out of context and manipulated to suggest scenarios that never occurred. The apron incident referenced in the original story is pure fantasy. No such exchange ever took place. I agreed to participate in this deception because I was paid substantially and because Caroline Sterling convinced me that Ms. Hayes was a manipulative gold digger who deserved exposure. I have since learned that every assumption underlying that belief was false. Valentina Hayes is not a gold digger. She is, in fact, wealthier than the family she was allegedly trying to exploit. Her charitable donations over the past decade exceed $50 million. All given anonymously until this investigation brought them to light. Her business accomplishments stand on their own merit, having nothing to do with her family's wealth or connections. Christopher Sterling's defense of his fiancée yesterday was not the desperate move of a man trying to salvage a business arrangement. It was the principled stand of someone willing to sacrifice everything to protect the person he loves from lies he knew to be untrue. I am exposing my own role in this deception not as an act of courage, but as a basic requirement of journalistic integrity. The truth matters, especially when lies are used as weapons against the innocent. The public reaction has been extraordinary, Franklin continued. Christopher's statement has been shared over 2 million times across social media platforms. The hashtag #LoveConquersLies is trending worldwide. Valentina's phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Girl, you need to see Twitter right now. The entire internet has fallen in love with your love story. She opened the Twitter app to find her mentions flooded with messages of support. At Tech Exec Mom, if my daughter brought home a man who would sacrifice his family's approval to defend her honor, I would know she found the right one. At Boston Librarian, Valentina Hayes funded our entire children's programming for 3 years and never wanted recognition. This woman's heart is pure gold. At Startup Founder, anyone who thinks Valentina Hayes is a gold digger has never seen her pitch deck. She's a brilliant entrepreneur who creates value, not someone who needs to marry it. The conference room door opened, and Christopher walked in with Benjamin Cross, the Sterling family attorney. Christopher looked exhausted but determined, wearing a fresh suit that couldn't quite hide the emotional toll of the past 2 days. But when he saw Valentina, his face lit up with the same smile that had captivated her at that charity gala months ago. How are you holding up? She asked, standing to embrace him. Better now that I'm here with you. He held her tightly, as if reassuring himself that she was real, that they had survived the storm. Ben has some updates on the legal situation. Benjamin Cross was a distinguished man in his 60s, with silver hair and the calm demeanor of someone who had spent decades navigating corporate crises. The Sterling Technologies board met in emergency session this morning, he began. Given the revelation that Caroline orchestrated the scandal to manipulate the merger negotiations, they have decided to remove both Robert Sterling and Caroline from their positions effective immediately. And Christopher? Franklin asked. The board has voted unanimously to make Christopher interim CEO while they conduct a search for permanent leadership. Benjamin's expression was carefully neutral. However, given the ongoing media attention and the company's precarious financial position, Christopher has declined the position. Valentina looked at Christopher in surprise. You turned down the CEO role? I turned down the opportunity to spend my life cleaning up messes created by people who put fear and greed ahead of basic human decency. Christopher's voice was calm but firm. I'm done trying to save people who were willing to destroy you to save themselves. What will you do? Christopher smiled, and this time it reached his eyes completely. "I'm going to start my own company. Clean slate, ethical leadership, focus on sustainable technology solutions." He looked at Franklin. "Actually, I was hoping to discuss a potential partnership with Hayes Industries. I have some ideas for renewable energy integration that might interest you." Franklin's eyebrows rose with interest. "I'm listening." "Later," Eleanor interrupted gently. "Right now, we have a more immediate situation to address." She turned to Benjamin. "What's the status with Caroline?" The attorney's expression darkened. "Caroline Sterling is facing potential criminal charges for fraud and conspiracy. The FBI has opened an investigation into her payment to Marcus Webb for fabricating news stories. She could face significant jail time." "And her parents?" "Robert and Patricia are cooperating fully with authorities. They claim they had no knowledge of Caroline's actions, and the evidence supports that claim." Benjamin paused. "They've asked if they could meet with you, Valentina. They want to apologize personally and discuss how to move forward." Valentina considered this. The Sterling parents had hurt her deeply, but their actions had been born from desperation and fear rather than calculated malice. "I'll meet with them. But Christopher needs to be there too." "Of course." Franklin cleared his throat. "There's one more piece of business to discuss. The original merger between Hayes Industries and Sterling Technologies." "What about it?" Christopher asked. "Sterling Technologies is being sold to a consortium of investors who specialize in corporate turnarounds. The sale will cover all debts and provide a modest return to shareholders, but the Sterling family will lose control of the company completely." Christopher nodded, appearing unsurprised. "It's better than bankruptcy. The employees will keep their jobs, and the technology will continue to be developed." "However," Franklin continued with a slight smile, "Hayes Industries has acquired several key patents from the Sterling portfolio. Patents that would be very valuable to a new sustainable technology startup with the right leadership." Christopher stared at his future father-in-law in amazement. "You're offering me a licensing deal?" "I'm offering you a partnership. Your expertise in development, our resources and market reach. Equal partnership, shared profits, complete creative control over your projects." Franklin's smile widened. "Consider it a wedding gift." "Franklin, I can't accept charity." "It's not charity. It's good business. You're brilliant, ethical, and now your family." Franklin stood and extended his hand. "Partners." Christopher shook his future father-in-law's hand, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Partners." Eleanor's phone chimed with an urgent notification. She glanced at the screen and her face lit up. "The Massachusetts Attorney General's office has just announced that they're launching an investigation into fraudulent media practices. Caroline's case is going to become the foundation for new laws protecting public figures from fabricated news stories." "So some good will come from this disaster," Valentina said quietly. "More good than you know," Benjamin added. 3 other journalists have come forward to admit that Caroline approached them with similar requests over the past year. Apparently, this wasn't her first attempt to manipulate media coverage to serve her family's interests. The revelation sent chills through the room. Caroline's betrayal had been even more calculating and extensive than any of them had realized. "There's something else," Christopher said, pulling out his phone. "I got a call from the Stanford Alumni Association this morning. They want to establish a scholarship fund in our honor. The Christopher Sterling and Valentina Hayes Scholarship for Ethical Technology Innovation." "Our honor?" Valentina asked. "They said our story proves that love and integrity can triumph over manipulation and greed. They want to support young entrepreneurs who demonstrate both technical brilliance and ethical leadership." Christopher's smile was soft, wondering. "They want our love story to inspire the next generation of innovators." Valentina felt tears pricking at her eyes. From the nightmare of fabricated scandals and family betrayal, something beautiful and meaningful was emerging. Their love hadn't just survived the storm, it had become a beacon for others. "There's a press conference scheduled for this afternoon," Eleanor said. "Both families together, presenting a united front, officially announcing the engagement and the new business partnership. "Are you ready for that?" Christopher asked Valentina. "Ready to face the media together?" "I'm ready for anything, as long as you're beside me." He leaned down and kissed her, gentle and sure, the same kiss that had made her believe in forever 8 months ago. But now it carried the weight of everything they'd survived together, every choice they'd made to choose love over fear, truth over convenience. When they broke apart, the emerald ring on Valentina's finger caught the morning light streaming through the conference room windows. The same ring that had symbolized hope and new beginnings 2 nights ago, before the world tried to tear them apart. Now it symbolized something even more powerful. Love that had been tested by the worst kind of betrayal and emerged stronger than ever. "When do you want to have the wedding?" Christopher asked. Valentina smiled, thinking of all the elaborate plans that had been derailed by scandal, all the social expectations that no longer mattered. "Tomorrow, if we could manage it. I don't want to wait another day to officially become your wife. The press would have a field day with such a quick ceremony." "Let them. We've survived their worst already." She looked around the room at the people who had stood by them through everything. Her parents, who had never wavered in their support. Benjamin Cross, who had navigated the legal complexities with skill and integrity. Christopher, who had chosen her over everything else in his world. "Besides," she continued, "I think the world has seen enough of our story to understand that this isn't about publicity or convenience. It's about 2 people who found something real and refused to let anyone take it away." Christopher lifted their joined hands, pressing another kiss to her knuckles right above his grandmother's ring. "Mrs. Sterling-to-be, I love the way you think. I love everything about you, Mr. Hayes Sterling-to-be." They laughed at the hyphenated name tangle, and Franklin cleared his throat pointedly. "Actually, about those name choices." "Later, Dad," Valentina said, still smiling at the man who had proven that real love meant choosing each other every single day, even when the world was watching, even when the cost was everything they'd once thought mattered. Outside the conference room windows, Boston sparkled in the December sunlight. Somewhere in the city, Caroline Sterling was facing the consequences of choosing fear over trust, manipulation over honesty. Her parents were learning to rebuild their lives without the company that had defined them for 3 generations. But inside the Hayes Industries boardroom, love had conquered every obstacle thrown in its path. 2 people who had been tested by betrayal, scandal, and the cruelest kind of manipulation had emerged with their bond stronger than ever. The fairy tale had survived the real world. And the best part was just beginning. Love like this doesn't come around often, the kind that survives betrayal, conquers scandal, and emerges stronger than ever. 6 months later, the Hayes family estate in Palo Alto buzzed with celebration as 300 guests gathered for the wedding reception of Christopher and Valentina Hayes Sterling. The couple had indeed married quickly, in a small ceremony at Boston's Trinity Church just 1 week after the scandal broke, with only immediate family present. But today's celebration was their chance to share their joy with everyone who had supported them through the storm. Valentina, radiant in a custom gown of champagne silk, moved through the crowd with Christopher's hand firmly in hers. His grandmother's emerald ring had been joined by a matching wedding band, and both caught the California sunset as she gestured while talking to guests. "Mrs. Hayes Sterling," a familiar voice called, and Valentina turned to see Marcus Webb approaching with his wife. The journalist looked genuinely happy, a stark contrast to the haunted man who had confessed his role in the fabricated scandal 6 months ago. "Marcus, I'm so glad you could make it." Valentina's forgiveness had been genuine, recognizing that he too had been manipulated by Caroline's desperation. "What are you thinking about?" Christopher murmured against her ear as the photographer captured their final shots. "I'm thinking about how grateful I am that Caroline's worst mistake led to our greatest triumph." "How so?" "If she hadn't forced us to choose each other over everything else, we might have spent years wondering if our love was real or just convenient. Her betrayal eliminated any doubt about what we mean to each other." Christopher spun her around in a circle, her champagne dress flaring out like flower petals, both of them laughing with pure joy. Around them, their family and friends applauded, the sound echoing across the California hillsides as the sun set behind them. Later that evening, as the last guests departed and the cleanup crew restored the garden to its pristine state, Valentina and Christopher sat together on the terrace swing where she had played as a child. Her head rested on his shoulder, his hand protective over her still flat stomach where their first child was growing. "No regrets?" he asked softly. "About marrying a man whose sister tried to destroy my life? About starting a business with someone whose family needed my father's money to survive? About choosing love over the safe, predictable path?" She tilted her head to look at him in the moonlight. "Not a single one. Even when the tabloids called you a gold digger? Especially then. Because that's when I learned what you're made of. That's when I knew I'd chosen the right man." Christopher kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair. "I love you, Mrs. Hayes Sterling. I love you too, Mr. Hayes Sterling. Forever and always." Above them, the California stars shone down on a love story that had survived betrayal, scandal, and the cruelest kind of manipulation. A love story that had become a beacon of hope for anyone who believed that truth and integrity could triumph over fear and greed. In the morning, they would return to their work of building sustainable technology solutions and supporting young entrepreneurs. They would continue healing the relationships damaged by Caroline's desperate actions. They would prepare for parenthood and all the joys and challenges that awaited them. But tonight, they were simply Christopher and Valentina, two people who had found each other against all odds and refused to let anyone take away what they had built together. The fairy tale was complete. And it was only the beginning. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So don't go anywhere. Click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't regret it.